Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever that you are and wherever you may be. Thank you very much for making us a part of your day. I am Brad Franklin, a creative content right here in Chesterfield. I'm very glad to tell you that Chesterfield Behind the Mic is on the air once again. Now, as we record this, September is right around the corner. As you listen to this, September is now upon us and is National Suicide Prevention Month. And one of the things we try to do each year in partnership with Mental Health Support Services is a campaign about suicide prevention. The topic changes year to year. This year, we're going to focus on 988, which is the National Suicide Support Lifeline. And we're going to get into a little bit of that, but specifically about how Chesterfield responds to mental health emergencies, which is, I think, a really important topic, and certainly one that I think I want people to know more about, and certainly I think would be in a lot of people's best interest to know more about. So I'm very happy to welcome Kristen Strickler from Mental Health Support Services on the show. First, Kristen, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate your time. We're going to talk to also Corporal Sawyer here from the Chesterfield County Police Department here in a few minutes about the way that Chesterfield is doing these kinds of things differently maybe than have been done in the past. Before we get into that, I always start with a little bit of an intro. I try to give folks an idea of who they're hearing from and that kind of thing. So tell me a little bit about yourself and your background and kind of your role in all of this.
Okay. Well, let's see. I've been involved in mental health services, psych services for probably over 20 years now. Wow. So I have an education of a bachelor's degree, I have a master's degree in counseling, and then they have a lot of letters after my name. So as of right now, hopefully by the time everybody hears this, I will be licensed professional counselor. Right now I am in residency for that. Okay. I've got like a couple hours left. I'm a certified substance abuse counselor. I've worked with people in addiction. And I am a certified pre-screening. Certified pre-admission screening counselor. Okay. That's a CPSC is what we know it as.
So how did you get involved in all that? Like, what was the sort of avenue for you to be doing this kind of line of work?
I've always worked with populations that maybe are a little underserved. Okay. I've worked in jails. I've worked in correction centers. I've worked, at private and public facilities, inpatient, outpatient, and I honestly was looking forward to working with law enforcement.
Yeah. Now, obviously, as I mentioned, each September we talk about suicide prevention and we try to raise awareness. And like I said, this year's theme is kind of interesting because it's not just 988, but it's also how Chesterfield's responding to mental health emergencies. But I also thought maybe we could start here. Can you talk to me a little bit about just sort of what, obviously the idea of suicide prevention, people understand that you're trying to prevent suicide, but why is that so important, and why is that awareness so important, especially in terms of the things that you're involved with in the line of work that you do?
Right. Suicide actually it can be prevented. It can be prevented with services. It can be prevented with education, trying to remove the stigma around it. Yeah. If we can break that down, make it comfortable so people can talk to us, then that's fantastic. Or if we can show up and be there like our core team does, our co-response team does, we show up and we're able to be on scene if any of that is actually going on, so they can have a hands-on experience and we can help with that.
Now that prevention angle, obviously the 988, the idea, for folks out there, if you're listening to this and you are frustrated because nowadays you have to dial 804 every time you dial. The reason for that is because at its most basic level, because they brought in the 988 and they had to change a handful of different area codes and exchanges, and one of them was the 804. And so that was a thing that has been obviously rolling out over the last couple of years. And I think in some ways it's probably still sort of, standing up for lack of a description. But in terms of what the 988 does, and I know, like I said, that this is still a thing that's coming together, but how would you sort of describe what people need to know about what the 988 is aiming to do and its kind of role in suicide prevention?
988 is put together, so it would almost be like 911. Right. It was an easy number, easy to get in contact, but just for mental health services. I don't know, it's readily available. It is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Right. There's Spanish speaking, there's veterans line. So they're very accommodating to different groups. And they are confidential. Right. And they also will be specific to the area. They're trying to be specific to the area that you are calling from. Right. So they can refer to resources and referrals, or, we can be sent out as mental health clinicians to the call as well.
So basically the idea here for folks who are listening to this, if you are somebody who is dealing with something, or if it's somebody that you're close to, somebody you care about, someone that you know, the 988 is a resource for you, much in the way that if you're not the one experiencing the health emergency, but maybe somebody in your family is, that's why, you call 911. Same as kind of general idea, just specifically, geared toward suicide prevention. We're obviously going to talk to Corporal Sawyer here in a few minutes about CORE and about the CCPD side of this. I'm curious to get some background on how this co-response came together, and because it's such a in our time, and especially in terms of the complexities of suicide and the complexities of mental health, it's such an interesting idea to pair, right? Somebody who is trained in law enforcement and somebody who's trained in what you do, right? And the kind of response that you're used to put that together to respond to these types of emergencies. How did this program, this new way of doing things, how did this happen? And take me through a little bit of the ins and outs of how it all works.
Okay. I wish I could say that it was originated over here, but actually originated on the West Coast in Washington State. And so they'd started teaming up clinicians to go out to mental health calls along with police officers.
Right.
And then over here, it actually got started. It's a mandated program for the Marcus David Peter Act.
Okay.
And it was for a young man that was killed during a mental health crisis by police. And so it's shifted so that we can focus and help people with mental health more so, and not have it as it's not a crime.
Right.
It's not a crime. You're not doing anything wrong or bad, but having more of a mental health aspect of it and helping aspect of it instead of a legal aspect.
Right.
We try to get them services, and so what has happened is we have all over the Commonwealth has partnered with mental health and law enforcement. And so some people do it differently, but we've chosen to actually ride together, be a team. We have 2 officers. I think we're getting a 3rd one. And all of the clinicians in my office and the crisis and emergency services office are trained to go out with the CORE officers. Some of us would rather do that.
Right.
Some of us would rather stay in the office.
Right.
But yes, so we get to go out with them. We respond to calls that are mental health, inclined.
Right.
So we get dispatched to calls.
Right.
And when we get to go and we get to help people, and I know my main goal is to offer them services and let them, kind of de-escalate a little bit.
Right.
And then hopefully not have to take them to the hospital or not have to take them, we avoid jail at all costs, but, offer them some services or reconnect them with the ones that they may have already had.
Right. And it sounds like from the way you're describing it that the folks that you work with, and when I say work with, I mean the folks that you're responding to, the folks who are having the emergencies, that they are in desperate need of somebody to help them. As you said the word de-escalation, and I feel like that is such a key part of this, where it's like you don't want it to continue to escalate. What you need is you need to bring it down. How, and I'm assuming that you've done a number of these to this point. What are some of the through lines in terms of the response that you've gotten from people when you guys show up together, and it's not just an officer, but it's also somebody who's going to help on the mental health side? How does that change that dynamic, and what's been the impact that you've seen from folks?
Most of the time, once people realize that I am not in law enforcement and that I am actually a clinician, sometimes I have to say that a couple times. It's not something that somebody in crisis is going to take in.
Right. Yeah.
So I reassure them that I'm not a police officer, that they're not in trouble.
Right.
And usually people will. I mean, sometimes they take more to the officer as far as gathering rapport.
Right.
But most of the time, they're very, very grateful that somebody that has cared has shown up. And some of them just look at you and just say, just take me.
Right.
And that means to the hospital. And so people most of the responses are very, very grateful.
Right.
And Some of the responses, it depends on their state of mind.
Right.
Some people are not in the right state of mind. They do need to go to the hospital. They do need some additional help and some coercing.
Right.
So, it does depend on the call, but
Right.
most people are grateful. And we've even had some follow-up calls as well to thank us. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
that's great.
it's cool.
I can also imagine that for those around them, right, for those who are maybe family members or friends or, spouses, that kind of thing, that there's a significant level of comfort that comes from having both kind of aspects, if you will, right, of the equation on site. You mentioned that, there are currently 2. You're hoping our guests in the process of getting a 3rd. What's the future of this look like from y'all's side of this? Do you want to? I'm assuming you want to continue to grow it and you want to have as many sort of resources as possible. But is that sort of the future, or how does it? What's the next step for the program as it kind of continues to kind of gain its footing and move forward?
Well, I'm a huge advocate of co-response. I'm a geek. You can even ask John. I would go all in 110% for this. I would hope that eventually we would be fully staffed at being able to respond to anything 24 hours a day.
Right.
I think that's everybody's goal. I don't know how that looks moving forward. But right now, I know that I'm trying to work on getting an evening group going, but there are 2 officers during the day. And probably maybe some more solid permanent core members moving forward. And we as clinicians we're spread thin.
Yeah.
So some of us have other additional jobs within the office and whatnot,
responsibilities and that kind of thing, right?
So hopefully, I would hope that we would be an identity to ourselves, but also part of crisis. But and just I want people to know who we are.
Right.
Get out there, be able to see our faces, and recognize this just like it would any other the PSAs or anything like that. I think that it would be great if they knew, and it would be people would call up and be like, hey, we need core.
Right.
We're in a crisis, but can you send one of those people?
Yeah. That was actually going to be my last question. A quick follow up, which is when you get to the scene, how many times are people surprised that it's not just an officer who comes, that it's actually, somebody with a clinician's background? Like, I would imagine that for most people, this program is super off the radar. It's not something they know about until they experience it themselves. What's been sort of your experience with that so far?
I think, like I said, it sometimes takes a little bit more explaining to them, particularly depending on their state. And then also it's kind of an all because we wear bulletproof vests. Right. The clinicians do. They have mental health written on them, but sometimes people are you're working with people that are in a crisis. However, the response is usually pretty welcoming, and they are. And they'll sometimes look at the officer, and then we'll have to explain what their role is. Right.
I think de-escalate was probably the best one, right?
Well, and if you look on the list, it says to minimize police presence. Right. So, some of the other officers that are not core officers can a lot of times leave. Right. And we can allow them to leave. And that's usually up to John or the core officer to say, hey, everything's safe here. This person's safe. We got this. You can go. And then relieves them and they can go back to do their police officer things. Right. So,
well, Kristen, thank you very much for coming on the podcast, talking to us a little about core and how Chesterfield's responding to these things. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
We are now joined by Corporal John Sawyer with the Chesterfield County Police Department. Corporal Sawyer, welcome to the podcast, sir. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Appreciate you coming on to talk about, obviously, a very important topic. I was just talking to Kristen about sort of this co-response, and I want to get into that, obviously, from the CCPD side. Before I do that, though, like I did with her, I want to give you a chance to sort of talk about your background, how it is that you came to be doing this kind of work, how it is that you came to be with CCPD. How did you get into doing all that kind of stuff?
Well, I'll just give you the Cliff Notes version. I graduated from LC Bird here in Chesterfield County. So I'm not born here, but raised here.
Right.
Joined the Army.
Okay.
Went over to Iraq, came back, became an electrician.
Okay.
Then that nasty recession back in 2009 hit.
Yeah.
Looking for something else to do. There's really not a whole lot out there, unfortunately, for veterans with combat experience and explosives. So got into the police department. Because I wanted to help people.
Right.
Been here about 13 years now.
Okay.
Because of the Marcus David Peters legislation that Kristen had mentioned, opened up a doorway for this co-response.
Right.
So I was tapped by some leadership, said I might be a good fit to help start this up. So that's what I did. It's the first position that I've been in since I've been with the police department where I actually felt like I was excited to go to work. Yeah. And I actually get to help people every day.
Obviously, we've learned a whole lot over the years about mental health emergencies, about how we can best respond to those. And I feel like programs like this are using that in real time, right? I feel like you're probably learning even more, even response, scene to scene to scene, incident to incident, right? So that you can sort of use as you go forward. From the CCPD side of this, give me some background on what kind of leadership led folks to think like, all right, this is the way we should do this. And tell me kind of a little bit from y'all's side of the picture, how that sort of all came together and how it works.
Well, it all started with the introduction of CIT here in Chesterfield County a little bit more than 10 years ago, kind of realizing we needed to approach these situations a little bit differently from the police department side. Not every call we go to is a criminal offense and somebody needs to go to jail, somebody needs to go in handcuffs, but we're the ones that have to go out there and respond to it. So it kind of started there. And then I think everybody's kind of agreed for a while that co-response was a good idea. But, there's always funding issues and things like that.
Right, yeah.
So this Marcus David Peters Act actually funds us to do this and mandates us to do it. So it's a great idea, but we're also told that we need to do it as well.
Well, and it's good, too, because a lot of times, you think about a lot of different stuff, like education especially, right? The unfunded mandates are a real thing, right? But the idea that it's not just mandated to you, but also funded, it's one of those pieces, I guess, that makes the process a little bit easier. So obviously you were there from the start. What was it like getting this thing going? How long did it take to sort of figure out the sort of the rhythm of it all between you and the other side on the mental health side of things?
Well, to be honest, we're still figuring it out.
That's fair.
To this day, but at first it was very uncomfortable as a police officer.
Right.
Having a mental health clinician riding around the passenger seat, I'm thinking to myself, I have to make sure they stay safe.
Right.
And then, we have two different belief systems too.
Right.
Which that was kind of something that surprised me as we got into it, that we really all kind of see things the same way. We all want to help people.
Right.
I have my resources and my skills, and the clinicians have theirs.
You obviously worked a lot of incidents, a lot of scenes, whatever it might be, before this, and now you've done a number of them since. What's been the biggest difference, in your opinion, when you've got somebody in this co-response versus in the older days before that, when you were just kind of arriving on scene? Can you feel the difference in people when they see this co-response and the impact that it has on them?
Yes. There's it's hard to build rapport with somebody when our normal response would have been, I went to a crisis scene, identified that we needed the next level of care for this person.
Right. Then
I would go through our emergency communication center to page a clinician to call me back. That would take 10 minutes to 30 minutes.
Right.
So then there's this awkward standing around time with someone who's probably the worst day of their life.
Right. They're going through some real stuff,
Exactly. Then followed by my phone ringing.
Yeah.
And then I have to break down that situation. Then I hand the phone over to the person, and the clinicians did the best that they could.
Right.
Through the phone, but some people react good to a phone conversation.
Right. Yeah.
I'd say most don't.
Right.
So instant rapport building when they get on scene. And it's just, my goal's always been to decriminalize mental health.
Right.
And I think that this is an instant way to do that.
Yeah.
Because, as long as the scene's safe and that person has rapport with my clinician, I usually just step out of it.
Right. I can also imagine, too, that as somebody who's in this line of work, you've learned a whole lot about what the other side does, like the mental health side and the strategies and sort of thought processes and sort of how Kristen and her folks go about doing what they do. And I can also see that, it can probably change the way you view a lot of different things. What's been your personal takeaways? You mentioned earlier the idea that like it really gives you the chance to make an impact in a substantial way. What's been the sort of experiences that you've had kind of doing this line of work and kind of doing it differently?
What I've learned is that it doesn't matter who you are, how much money you have in your checking account, anyone's susceptible to a mental illness.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't, we serve all types of folks, and that kind of destigmatized it for me, and other officers out here that maybe are having some issues. kind of opening up that door to actually reaching out for help once,
right?
Or finally,
yeah. Yeah, I can also see too that your fellow officers, that this kind of approach was probably really welcomed from their standpoint, because they probably went to a lot of calls and were in a situation like you where you're on the phone, you're trying to talk through, and you just know it could be better. What's been the response from other officers about the work you guys do?
At least on the calls I go to, they love it.
Yeah.
They love that we're here to take care of this,
right?
And they don't have to go that phone route,
right?
And spend an hour and a half on the phone trying to work it out,
right?
Like Kristen said, as long as the scene's safe and everything's pretty controllable at that point, we might keep one officer down the street or something,
right,
in case something went south, because we are dealing with some unpredictable situations,
right?
But a scene where we might have 6 or 7 officers there because someone's suicidal, now it might just me and Kristen talking to that person,
right?
So they like it. I mean, honestly, throughout the department, we have specialties for everything,
right?
From child abuse situations
right.
to traffic fatalities.
Right.
We've got SWAT, we've got investigations. We've always been really lacking a specialty group for mental health
right.
response.
Right.
So it gives us that.
Yeah. All right, last one for you. From a personal standpoint, as somebody who is obviously, you've seen a whole lot in this world, between your tour and between the work you do now, how impactful is it to you as a person to be able to have the sort of impact that you're able to have doing this kind of work?
It is, like I said earlier, I actually enjoy coming to work now. I'm not saying that I didn't like police work, but you don't really know what you're getting into. I might be standing, directing traffic all day. I might be, I might get hurt. Yeah. I mean, I've been to the hospital 6 or 7 times as a police officer.
Right.
So now I feel a lot more comfortable coming to work. Feels a lot more rewarding. Yeah. And I think the most rewarding part is, I know you mentioned it's Suicide Prevention Month coming up, is that's where we, I think as a core team, have some of the biggest impacts, because somebody contacts 988,
yep.
says, wow, this is a situation where someone needs
right.
help.
Right.
Well, it's usually the police that get called.
Right.
And a lot of people are really scared of that.
Yeah.
And because of some of these incidents the police have seen in the news, sometimes we have to protect ourselves.
Right. Yep.
So some of these situations, we end up with 8, 9, 10, 11 officers.
Yeah.
Sometimes based on third-party information.
Right. Right.
And we can show up to that scene, kind of make some phone calls, try to de-escalate over the phone before we get there.
Right.
And then I wanted to explain to other folks that if you reach out for help, with suicidal ideations, the vast majority of the people that we deal with, they aren't taken into custody.
Right.
We're not raiding all your guns from the house.
Right.
And that's what a lot of people are afraid of.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, those are that's the worst possible situation if we're coming in there and taking that. But if you haven't done anything wrong, you're just having a really bad day, you shouldn't be afraid to give us a call.
Right.
I mean, we may show up with that response that might scare people sometimes.
But that's just like you said, it's just from a safety standpoint. Being able to,
is.
You're not sure what you're going to get until you're actually there, right?
That's exactly it. But that's what me and my clinicians, especially Kristen, like to do, is we like to say, okay, all these other officers, you guys can go.
Right. Yeah.
We've got this. We've got this person. We get them whatever they need.
Right.
And then that's it. They don't lose their job.
Right.
They don't lose their gun rights.
Right.
They aren't committed against their will.
Right.
So,
and this goes back to the whole stigma piece, right?
Yeah.
There's such a stigma to mental health and getting any sort of help. And this is a perfect situation to describe that, right? Which is you've got folks who are scared to call because they aren't sure what's going to happen. And now the more that the folks can know, hey, this is what's going to happen. Like if you haven't done anything wrong, you got nothing to worry about, that you're going to get the resources you need. And this is just the avenue to get it. I think that sort of goes to a lot of the sort of stigma breaking that you guys are obviously looking to do as much as you can.
Yeah, that's it. And the other thing I'll mention about the team being a benefit is that I think I touched on it earlier. Once one of our core clinicians is having a conversation with you, that's covered under HIPAA.
Right.
So when I step away and I'm not listening, I mean, that's a private conversation, just like you would go and have with your therapist. Right. Now, of course, if you say something like,
you're doing it right.
I'm going to go hurt somebody right now, then we'll act on that. But
right.
I've seen that as a valuable tool because sometimes people aren't willing to tell the full story to a law enforcement officer.
Right.
And then sometimes some of the things that they say we might be forced to act upon.
Right. Gotcha.
So I will just mention that part as well.
Yeah, that's fair. And I appreciate you doing that. And I appreciate you coming on the show, John. I really appreciate you coming on talking about the co-response and what you guys do. And I very much appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Now, make sure you check us out on social media. On Twitter, it's at Chesterfield VA, and on Instagram, it's Chesterfield, Virginia, all one word. On Facebook, you can check out our podcast page. Just search Chesterfield Behind the Mic. Now, make sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Overcast, or wherever it is that you get your shows. And if you're so inclined, if you give us a rating and review, we greatly appreciate it. As always, a video version of our show is available on our YouTube channel as well as on our website, chesterfield.gov/podcast. That's also where you can submit feedback anytime, make suggestions, or just reach out to us. You can watch the show on WCCT Thursday through Sunday at 7 on the weekends at noon. That is Comcast Channel 98 and Verizon Channel 20. Lastly, check out chesterfield.gov/connect with us to find out a number of other ways to connect with Chesterfield County. My thanks to my director, Martin Stith, my executive producer, Teresa, Bonifas, and all the good folks from Constituent and Media Services for all they do. And my thanks to you for joining us today. So, from all of us here in Chesterfield, thanks again for making us a part of your day. We'll see you again real soon. Take good care. From blogs to podcasts, newsletters to alerts, social media, the latest community news, our Connect With Us webpage has you covered. Chesterfield.gov/connect with us, your source for all things Chesterfield.